You're sitting on a couch at 2 a.m. You have work tomorrow. You know you have work tomorrow. But the match is on. Your team is playing. You are wearing a jersey that cost you $80 and you are screaming at a television in a language that no one else in your apartment speaks fluently. This is the World Cup, the greatest sporting event on earth. 32 nations, 64 matches, 4 weeks of collective insanity that crosses every border, every language, every reason to go to bed at a sensible hour. And somewhere in Zurich, in a building with very good air conditioning, a group of men in suits are watching the exact same thing you are. Except they're not screaming. They're smiling because every jersey you bought, every ticket you couldn't afford, every pay-per-view subscription you didn't read the fine print on, it went somewhere. Ratty was in the wall when they counted it. Here's what Ratty overheard. Ratty didn't climb 5 floors for a football lesson. He came because the thing behind the sport is stranger than the sport. This is about the organization that owns football. That sells football back to you at a markup. That built itself into one of the wealthiest, unaccountable institutions on the planet. And did it using a thing called non-profit status. We're going to walk through how FIFA went from a small European gentleman's club to a machine that extracts billions from host nations. We're going to look at the Qatar deal, the one that cost workers their lives and cost a country its credibility. We're going to look at where the money actually goes. And we're going to look at the one structural truth that explains all of it. By the end, you won't watch the World Cup the same way. You'll still watch it. Ratty will still watch it. But you'll know what you're actually funding. You are a Swiss bureaucrat in 1904. You love football. A few other Europeans also love football. You decide to form an association. It will be called the Fédération Internationale de Football Association, FIFA, and it will organize international matches so that everyone plays by the same rules. That's it. That's the whole plan. A rulebook and a handshake. For the first 50 years, FIFA was essentially a hobby club for men who wore hats to sporting events. Small budget, small staff. The World Cup started in 1930. Uruguay hosted it because Uruguay had money and enthusiasm. And for decades, it was remarkable mostly for being a genuine sporting festival. Countries competed. A winner was crowned. Everyone went home. Then television happened. Ratty was not in the wall in the 1970s. Ratty had not yet been born, but he has read every document from that era. And here is what happened. The moment FIFA realized that 1 billion people would sit in front of a screen to watch football, the organization stopped being about football. It became about the screen rights. A man named João Havelange became FIFA president in 1974. He was Brazilian. He was charming. He expanded the World Cup from 16 teams to 24, then later to 32. More teams meant more countries invested in the outcome. More countries meant more broadcast markets. More broadcast markets meant more money for the television rights. Havelange didn't invent corruption at FIFA, but he understood that FIFA's product was not a sport. It was an audience, and he priced it accordingly. This is the part they don't put in the textbook. FIFA is registered as a non-profit organization in Switzerland. A non-profit. The organization that owns the most watched sporting event in human history. That controls billions in revenue every 4 years. That sits on cash reserves larger than some nations' GDP. Non-profit. That's not an accident. Ratty will come back to that, because the non-profit structure is not a clerical quirk. It is the entire strategy. And once you see how it works, you'll understand why they'll never change it. Here's what Ratty found in the financial disclosures. The ones FIFA files every 4 years. Because FIFA only has to tell the world what it made during World Cup cycles, not in between. FIFA's revenue from a single World Cup tournament is measured in the billions. The bulk of it comes from 3 sources: broadcast rights, sponsorship deals, and licensing fees. FIFA sells the right to show the matches. FIFA sells the right to put a logo near the matches. FIFA sells the right to call your product official World Cup partner. These are not small numbers. These are numbers that would make a Fortune 500 CFO sit up straight. FIFA's cut from one World Cup is larger than the entire GDP of Iceland, a country that actually qualified. Here's what FIFA pays in return for hosting a World Cup. Essentially nothing. The host country pays. The host country builds the stadiums, sometimes from scratch, on land that requires demolishing neighborhoods. The host country builds the roads, the hotels, the airports, the infrastructure required to move 100,000 foreign visitors through a country that was not previously designed to receive 100,000 foreign visitors. Simultaneously, FIFA's standard hosting contract, and Ratty has seen summaries of how these contracts are structured, gives FIFA and its commercial partners tax exemptions inside the host country for the duration of the tournament. FIFA's income from the event is not taxed by the host nation. FIFA's sponsors pay no local VAT on tournament operations. FIFA's executive travel, accommodation, and logistics are covered by the host. Say that again. The host country, meanwhile, takes on the debt. South Africa built stadiums for the 2010 World Cup that are now called white elephants, a polite term for expensive buildings that sit empty because no local football league can fill them or maintain them. Brazil spent billions preparing for 2014, and a significant portion of that infrastructure has since deteriorated or been repurposed at additional cost. These are not allegations. These are documented in post-tournament analyses by economists and local governments who did the math after the confetti. Settled. Do that math, Ratty did. He had to sit down after. Hold on, Ratty hears the cat on the third floor. Give him a second. Okay. Where were we? The debt. You were watching the opening ceremony in November. It is 28 degrees and the stadium is air-conditioned. Ratty knows who paid for that air conditioning. Qatar is a country of roughly 3 million people, most of whom are migrant workers from South Asia and Africa. It is one of the wealthiest nations per capita on Earth because it sits on an enormous reservoir of natural gas. It is also, by any reasonable measure, not a football nation. It had never hosted a major international tournament. Its domestic football infrastructure was limited. Its summer temperatures regularly exceed 40 degrees Celsius, which is why FIFA initially awarded the tournament as a summer event and then had to move it to November, disrupting every major European league season, which disrupted every club's commercial schedule, which cost billions across the sports ecosystem. That calendar disruption caused exactly 0 seconds of hesitation in the FIFA Executive Committee that awarded Qatar the tournament. Ratty found out why, roughly, in the years following the decision. A series of investigative journalists and the U.S. Department of Justice, which takes FIFA bribery very seriously, for reasons that are themselves interesting, documented a pattern of payments and gifts flowing around the bidding process. Several FIFA officials were indicted. Several pleaded guilty. The DOJ's investigation, which resulted in charges against over 24 football officials and sports marketing executives, described a system in which World Cup hosting rights were treated as a commodity to be sold to the highest and most generous bidder. But here is the part that doesn't get discussed enough. The workers. Qatar built 8 stadiums and significant supporting infrastructure for a tournament that lasted 1 month. It built them using a labor system called kafala, a sponsorship arrangement that, in practice, made it extremely difficult for migrant workers to leave their employer, change jobs, or return home without employer permission. Workers came from Nepal, from Bangladesh, from India, from Kenya. They worked in extreme heat. Many were housed in labor camps with conditions that were documented by journalists who managed to get access. The number of migrant workers who died during Qatar's construction period is disputed. The Qatari government released one figure, the Guardian newspaper, using mortality data from the countries that sent the workers, published a substantially higher estimate. The two numbers are far apart. The truth is somewhere between them. And the fact that we cannot agree on what that number is 4 years after the tournament ended is itself a verdict. FIFA investigated. FIFA expressed concern. FIFA held the tournament. The opening ceremony was beautiful. Ratty was in the wall for the commercial breaks. Here's what Ratty found in the budget. FIFA's stated mission is to develop football globally, to use the sport as a tool for youth development, gender equality, and access for underrepresented nations. This is the language in FIFA's own governance documents. Development, access, the beautiful game for everyone. Here is how the money is actually distributed. FIFA takes its production costs and operational expenses off the top. A substantial portion goes to the member associations, the 211 national football federations that make up FIFA's voting base. This sounds democratic. It is, in practice. The reason reform is structurally impossible. Each of FIFA's 211 member associations gets a vote at the Congress. Many of those associations represent nations with tiny football followings and tiny populations. But they vote, and the way you keep 211 organizations voting the way you want them to vote is by maintaining a system of development. Grants, technical assistance payments, and financial disbursements that flow from FIFA to those associations every year, regardless of tournament cycle. It is not a bribe. It is a relationship. And relationships, as anyone who has ever been in a business arrangement they couldn't easily exit will tell you, have a cost. Meanwhile, the players, the ones people actually watch, the ones whose faces are on every commercial, receive a share that goes through their clubs, through their national associations, through a distribution mechanism that takes multiple cuts before it reaches anyone who kicked a ball. The women's game receives a fraction of the men's game's prize money. This gap has been widely documented and publicly criticized, including by players, sponsors, and FIFA's own reform committees. The gap persists, and that's the part they're counting on you not to notice. Ratty is not a financial advisor. Ratty is a rat in a Spider-Man suit. But let's talk about the Swiss nonprofit registration, because this is the structural heart of the entire operation. A nonprofit organization, in most tax jurisdictions, exists to serve a public benefit purpose. It reinvests surplus revenue into that purpose. It does not distribute profits to shareholders, because it has no shareholders. In exchange for this structure, it receives tax exemptions that for-profit entities do not receive. FIFA's Swiss registration means that its primary revenue, the broadcast rights, the sponsorship income, the licensing fees, accumulates within a non-profit shell. FIFA pays its executives. FIFA pays its member associations. FIFA funds its development programs, which are genuine but modest relative to total revenue. And FIFA retains substantial cash reserves that have, at various points, been described in financial journalism as sitting well above the level needed for operational stability. Those reserves are not taxed in Switzerland at normal corporate rates. The host country doesn't tax FIFA's tournament earnings under the hosting agreement. The commercial partners receive favorable treatment in the host country because FIFA's contract requires it. The money moves through a non-profit and arrives, somehow, in the hands of a very small number of people and institutions, mostly the ones who already had money to begin with. The mechanism isn't illegal. Most of it is legal. That's the whole plan. That's the whole plan. Every few years, FIFA announces reform, usually after a scandal. The Havelange era ended with corruption allegations. The Sepp Blatter era, Blatter ran FIFA for nearly 2 decades, ended with US federal indictments, Swiss criminal proceedings, and an image crisis that forced a genuine institutional reckoning. Gianni Infantino became FIFA president in 2016 on a reform platform. He was the candidate who was not under criminal investigation, which was, at that particular moment in FIFA history, a meaningful differentiator. He promised transparency. He promised a new FIFA. He then moved to live in Qatar before the 2022 tournament, a decision that generated significant international commentary. He expanded the World Cup to 48 teams, which increases FIFA's broadcast inventory, sponsorship reach, and revenue per cycle substantially. He awarded the 2030 World Cup to a coalition of 6 countries across 3 continents, a logistical arrangement. Unprecedented in the tournament's history, but very good for maximizing the number of broadcast markets buying in. Each reform cycle expands FIFA's footprint. Each expansion generates more revenue. The structure that enables the extraction, the nonprofit status, the hosting contract terms, the member association voting system, remains unchanged. The reform is real. The structure is untouched. The machine keeps running. Here's the uncomfortable conclusion. And Ratty is not going to pretend it isn't uncomfortable. You are going to watch the next World Cup. Ratty is going to watch the next World Cup. We are both going to lose sleep over matches involving countries we have no rational reason to care about at 2A. M. On a Tuesday. This is non-negotiable. The sport is too good. The drama is too real. The moments are genuinely irreplaceable, but the thing you're watching was built on a foundation that extracts maximum value from the least powerful people in. The transaction. The host countries that took on debt. The migrant workers who built the stadiums. The women's players who received a fraction of the men's prize money. The national associations in smaller countries whose development grants come with the implicit cost of their Congress. Vote. The product is beautiful. The pipeline that delivers it is not. Knowing that doesn't make you cynical. It makes you accurate. And being accurate about the systems that govern your money, your attention, and your values. That's the only leverage anyone without a Zurich office actually has. Ratty has been in this wall for a while now. The conversations have changed. The amounts have gotten larger. The press releases have gotten more sophisticated. But the pattern, extract from the many, concentrate at the top, call the structure a nonprofit, that hasn't changed. Ratty watched the final. He screamed. He felt terrible about it. He screamed again. That's the part they're counting on your love of football to make you forget. The couch, the jersey, the 2 a.m. you that chose the match over sleep. That person is the product. The machine is built around him. Don't forget, there's another room Ratty's been listening in on. It's about the company that owns more of your retirement account than you do. And it has the same nonprofit problem, just with better branding. Ratty found it. We'll go through it next. If this wall had a subscribe button, Ratty would have taped it to the ventilation shaft by now. You know where to find it? The cat is coming. Ratty has to go.